The leash burned through Officer Ramirez's palm. Titan had broken. In seconds, the canine ripped across the crosswalk, dragging him into oncoming traffic, not after a threat, not chasing a scent, just locked on something only he could sense. Ramirez stumbled after him, shouting commands Titan had never disobeyed. But the dog kept pulling toward the bench. That is when Ramirez saw it. A hand, limp, barely visible behind a trash bin. Then the baby blanket, half crumpled, wind-blown. Titan reached her first. A pregnant woman, unconscious, collapsing in slow motion. The dog curled around her belly and froze, shielding what no one else had even seen. Ramirez called for medics, heart pounding. This was not instinct. It was not training. It was something no manual could teach, a dog who knew when life was slipping away and ran straight into danger to catch it. If this moment stunned you too, share it with someone who still believes in real heroes, on 4 legs or 2. The leash had worn thin over the years. Not from neglect, Officer Ramirez took care of his gear, but from miles. Miles of patrols, tracks, call-outs, foot pursuits. Every groove in the leather held a memory. Every fray a moment. It had never snapped, never even strained. Until that day, Titan had been different that morning. Not distracted, not agitated, just ahead of something. That was the only way Ramirez could describe it. Like the dog was listening to a frequency no one else could hear. Their shift started normal. Patrol around the outskirts of town, swing by the school zone before lunch. It was late fall, the sky dull and heavy. A wind was picking up, but not enough to raise alarm. Just enough to carry things. Smells, sound, the kind of air Titan liked. Nose twitching, ears on a swivel. He was a good dog. Not just trained, tuned. Ramirez had spent 3 years on the force before he qualified for K-9 work. Titan was his first partner. From day one, the bond had been precise, predictable. You don't question the dog when the dog knows his job. But as they walked along Cypress Avenue, Titan started tugging, subtle at first, a few inches forward, then a pause. Ramirez noticed, but chalked it up to wind. Leaves were blowing across the pavement in lazy swirls. Trash bins were lined near the curb, probably just catching a scent. They passed a crosswalk. Red light. Titan slowed with him, but his ears didn't relax. Settle, Ramirez muttered, barely above a whisper. Titan did not break form, but his body was braced, muscles engaged like a spring waiting for release. Then came the pull. It wasn't aggressive, not even strong, just a jolt, a twitch, the kind of thing you feel in your nerves before your mind processes it. The leash went tight. Not like during drills. Not like a takedown or a command gone misunderstood. This was something else. Intent without permission. Ramirez's first instinct was to correct. His hand closed around the worn loop of the leash, the one that always rested just below his glove line. Titan pulled again, stronger. Ramirez's boots shuffled forward before he dug in. Whoa. No, that's when Titan launched. No bark. No lunge. Just forward. Purposeful. Like a magnet pulled his chest into the street. The leash burned Ramirez's palm as he fought to hold it. His arm jolted, shoulder twisting hard. The two of them broke the crosswalk line, into the road. A horn blared. A minivan swerved. Ramirez's heart shot into his throat as tires screamed. The leash pulled him off balance. He stumbled sideways, feet tangling as he tried to regain control. Titan wasn't stopping. Titan, heel. He might as well have been shouting into the wind. The dog tore across the painted lines, dragging his handler behind. Ramirez dug his heels into the asphalt. Nothing. The frayed edges of the leash were all that connected them now. Ramirez's eyes darted ahead. What the hell was he seeing? The sidewalk looked empty. Just a bench, a trash bin, an old newspaper stand tipped sideways. And then he caught it. Movement, no. Stillness disguised as movement. Something low, human shape, slumped behind the bench, partially hidden. A hand, pale, fingers curled like they were grasping something, and then, blowing near it, clinging to the sidewalk like a ghost of something left behind, a small, pink baby blanket. Dirty at the corners, wrinkled, wet on one edge. His stomach dropped. Titan was running to her. Ramirez stopped fighting. He sprinted. He hit the curb with a crunch of boots and vaulted forward. Following Titan, who was already crouched low beside the woman, she was young, barely in her 20s. Her jacket stretched tightly over her belly. 8 months, maybe more. One hand was on her stomach. The other lay limp by her side. Ramirez dropped beside them, fingers on her neck. Pulse, faint. Breathing, shallow. Skin cold. Titan didn't bark. Didn't move. He laid down gently, curling his body around her midsection, pressing into her like a shield. Ramirez reached for his radio, fingers fumbling. Unit 37, we need medical. Female, pregnant, unconscious, non-responsive. Cyprus and Maine, code red. Titan's head rested near her stomach. His body was shaking, but not from fear, from restraint. Like every cell in his body was holding position, refusing to abandon this post. The leash dangled now, draped across her hip. The frayed edge tickled the fabric of the blanket, and in that moment, Ramirez understood this was not obedience. It was something deeper, something unspoken. But why her? Why here? What had Titan felt before anyone else even knew she was there? The medics were still minutes out, and Titan was still. The sirens were still distant, too distant for comfort. Ramirez stayed crouched beside the woman, eyes flicking between her pale face and the steady, unmoving body of the dog pressed against her. Titan hadn't budged since he laid himself across her belly, chest rising slow and even, like he was trying to match her failing rhythm. She was alive, but barely. The wind picked up, tossing leaves against the curb. One drifted across the crosswalk light post, brushing against the faded red "Don't Walk" signal still frozen in place. That light hadn't changed since Titan ran. Ramirez hadn't even noticed. They'd crossed against it. Illegally, dangerously, without hesitation. Because Titan hadn't cared about the rules, he had known. Ramirez glanced down again. The woman's hand had shifted slightly. Her fingers twitched, barely visible, but enough. A sign of life. He whispered into his radio for an ETA, but the dispatcher couldn't do more than repeat the response. 5 minutes? Traffic. Back up. They were alone for now. Titan, Ramirez muttered. You see something I don't? Titan didn't blink. His head remained low, resting just above the curve of the woman's stomach. He was still watching her, but there was something else in his posture. Alertness. A quiet readiness. As if something was about to happen, Ramirez wasn't new to K9 behavior. He knew Titan's body language better than anyone. The dog's focus, the slight tension in his back legs, the stillness in his breathing. It wasn't fear. It was protection. Total, unwavering protection, and yet none of it made sense. There had been no call, no alert from dispatch, no passerby waving them down. The woman was completely hidden from the street, curled behind a metal bench, her form obscured from almost every angle. Ramirez wouldn't have seen her if Titan hadn't pulled him. That thought made something shift in his chest. He looked up briefly, scanning for signs of anyone watching. Nothing, just the sleepy stretch of shops and cracked sidewalks. No voices, no footsteps. Just wind and leaves and that damn red crosswalk signal blinking overhead like an accusation. He should have been angry. Titan had broken protocol. He had dragged his handler into traffic. If someone had gotten hurt, if things had gone differently, Ramirez would be sitting in an internal review right now, answering questions about control, obedience, risk, but all he could feel was awe. He reached out slowly, ran a gloved hand along Titan's back. The dog twitched, but didn't shift position. He was rooted. This isn't in the manual. Partner, Ramirez whispered. Titan's ears flicked slightly at the sound of his voice, but his eyes never left the woman. Then, movement. A low groan escaped her lips. Her body stirred, shoulders twitching. Ramirez leaned in immediately, gently adjusting her position to open her airway. She blinked, eyelids fluttering like moths. Ma'am, he said softly. Stay with me. You're okay. Help's coming. Her lips parted, a breath. Barely there. Ramirez reached for her wrist again, checking pulse. It was slightly stronger now. Still weak, still terrifying. But something had changed. Titan remained frozen. Still not moving, huh? Ramirez said under his breath. He looked up again, and that was when he saw it. The ambulance, finally rounding the far corner, lights flashing like salvation through fog. Ramirez stood up, waving both arms. The medics saw him immediately and veered across the empty lane, jumping the curb as the rear doors opened before the vehicle even stopped. 2 EMTs rushed out. Ramirez rattled off vitals, status, everything he had. They dropped beside the woman, assessing her quickly. One of them moved toward her abdomen, then froze. Is this the dog that found her? he asked, startled by how close Titan was. "Yeah," Ramirez said. "He hasn't moved." "Well, we're going to need him to." But Titan didn't move. The medic reached forward with caution, but Ramirez raised a hand. "Let me." He knelt beside his partner. "Titan, off." Titan's ears flattened slightly. His body tensed. But he didn't move. Ramirez's voice dropped. "Buddy, I know. You did your job. Let them take over now. Still, nothing." The other medic glanced up. "He's not letting go," Ramirez sighed. A deep, tired breath, because he understood. Titan didn't trust anyone else yet. Not with her. Not until he saw it himself, that she was being helped. That she was safe. Then, slowly, Titan stood. Not fast, not startled. Just steady, measured. He backed off half a step, then circled around, placing himself behind the EMTs. Still watching. Still alert. That was the moment Ramirez felt it. The line between training and instinct shattered. This wasn't about commands. This wasn't about protocol. Titan had chosen. The medics went to work, cutting her jacket open, placing leads, checking fetal heart rate. Ramirez stepped back, watching everything, but unable to stop thinking about the first second. The leash tug, the red crosswalk light, the traffic, the bolt across the road. Titan had known before he had seen, and in a city full of distractions, that single blink of instinct had led them to save 2 lives instead of reading about 1 lost. But one question still echoed louder than any siren. How did the dog know? The ambulance doors slammed shut with a finality that shook Ramirez more than he expected. The whine of the siren rose again, louder now that it was moving, as the vehicle peeled away from the curb. Titan stood beside him, panting lightly, eyes still locked on the back of the disappearing rig. He hadn't taken his gaze off her the entire time. Ramirez exhaled slowly and unclipped the leash from Titan's collar. The frayed leather hung limp in his hand. For the first time in years, it felt almost symbolic, like that leash hadn't just tethered him to the dog, but to something deeper, something ancient, a lifeline to a creature that had chosen to break every command, every rule, to answer something that couldn't be taught. He turned away, scanning the sidewalk. Wind whipped past again, and there it was, the baby blanket. It had been caught in the grass near the edge of the curb, barely held in place by a crushed soda can. Ramirez bent to pick it up. The fabric was light, cheap fleece, pink with a faded pattern of tiny cartoon elephants. Dirt smeared one corner. The other was soaked through. He held it for a second, longer than he should have, then folded it carefully and slid it into the side pocket of his jacket. They'd need it at the hospital. Titan nosed his leg softly, the way he did when he was asking without asking. "I don't know either," Ramirez said quietly. They walked back to the cruiser in silence. The ride to the hospital was short, 10 minutes. Maybe less, but it felt longer. Ramirez kept one hand on the wheel, the other brushing the folded blanket in his pocket, like checking to make sure the moment hadn't just evaporated. Titan sat in the back seat, but not like usual. He didn't sprawl or settle. He sat upright, eyes forward, body rigid, watching the road like he still wasn't finished. When they arrived, Ramirez checked in with dispatch and got clearance to stay on site. The ER lobby buzzed with quiet tension, nurses at terminals, a security guard by the door, a vending machine humming against one wall. Ramirez gave the receptionist a brief version of what had happened. "She came in 5 minutes ago," the woman said. "No ID on her yet. They're still assessing. You can wait, but it'll be a while." He nodded, then found a corner chair near the end of the hallway and lowered himself into it. Titan sat at his feet. He should have been typing his report. Should have been reviewing body cam footage, noting timestamps, mapping out the moment when protocol had broken. But he couldn't stop replaying that second in the street, when Titan had lunged, when Ramirez had tried to stop him, and failed. Had he really tried to stop him? Or had he hesitated just enough to let the leash slip tighter? He didn't know. What he did know was this. If he had followed the rules, if he had corrected the behavior, used the collar, pulled Titan back, she would be dead, and maybe the baby too. Ramirez reached into his jacket, pulled out the blanket again. He stared at it, ran a thumb across the stained edge. Titan rested his chin on Ramirez's boot. The nurse came 30 minutes later. Not with good news, not with bad. She's stable for now. unconscious but stable. Early signs of hypoglycemia, blood pressure crash, dehydration. We think she was out there for at least 20 minutes before you found her. Could have been longer, Ramirez nodded. The baby? The nurse's face didn't change. They're running more tests. Too early to tell. She gestured toward a small intake window. You said you had something of hers? Ramirez handed over the blanket. The nurse took it with both hands, carefully, like it meant more than it looked. She had nothing else with her, she said. No bag, no phone, no ID, just a blanket, Ramirez thought. And a dog who would not let go. Titan stood again as the nurse left, tail flicking once before settling. Ramirez looked down at him. You knew, he said aloud. Titan didn't respond, of course not, but he also didn't break eye contact. And in that gaze, Ramirez saw something he hadn't wanted to admit until now. This wasn't just a K-9 unit. This wasn't about training or discipline or protocol. This was something else. Titan hadn't saved her for Ramirez. Titan had saved her despite him. And now, as Ramirez sat there in the half-lit hallway, hands empty, badge heavy, he realized something even harder to admit. He was scared. Because what if the baby didn't make it? What if this story, the one Titan had started, ended in silence? A door opened at the far end of the hall. A doctor stepped out, scanning the corridor. Officer Ramirez? He stood fast. Titan did, too. The doctor's face was unreadable. Can we talk for a minute? The hallway felt colder when the doctor led him inside. Sterile white tiles, low humming from fluorescent lights, that clinical scent of antiseptic and something metallic underneath. Ramirez had walked through 100 emergency wings in his career, but this time felt different. Closer, sharper. Titan padded silently beside him, gait steady, tail low, not tucked but cautious. Watching everything, the doctor led them into a small private consult room. No windows, just a wall-mounted clock ticking louder than it should, a folder under the doctor's arm, and a mirror on the far wall reflecting both man and dog. Ramirez could barely look at it. She's still unconscious, the doctor began. Vitals are stable, but there's significant dehydration and a possible episode of eclampsia. We're monitoring, Ramirez nodded. And the baby? A beat? Just one. We're concerned about fetal distress, the doctor said, keeping his voice level. She was outside too long. Heat loss, low blood sugar, and the trauma of collapse all add risk. We're doing everything we can. Ramirez leaned back against the wall, one hand sliding into his pocket where the blanket had been, though it was already handed off. It was muscle memory now, reaching for something soft in a moment that was turning harder by the second. Do we know who she is? He asked. The doctor shook his head. No ID, no phone. No emergency contacts. Her prints came up clean. No criminal records. We'll run facial recognition, but that takes time. Ramirez stared at the floor. Titan sat at his feet, tail brushing once against his boot. She's completely alone. Yes, the doctor said. Except for him. Ramirez looked up. Your dog, the doctor clarified. Our staff said he wouldn't leave her side until you pulled him off. I've seen a lot of animals in this place. Service dogs, therapy dogs. But this was different. Ramirez didn't answer. He couldn't, because he didn't have the words for what he saw either. Instead, his eyes drifted to the mirror across the room. It was tall, narrow, probably one of those one-way glass setups. But in the moment, it didn't matter. He saw himself, uniform wrinkled, face drawn, eyes older than he remembered. And beside him, Titan, sitting tall, silent, present. They looked like a unit. They were a unit, but somehow today, Titan had been the one who led. Ramirez saw the leash in his mind again, the moment it tightened, the pull, the fight. How close he'd come to stopping him. How close he came to making the biggest mistake of his life. He hadn't trusted his partner. Not when it counted. Is she going to make it? He asked softly. We don't know yet, the doctor said. We're monitoring closely. Her condition is delicate, but it's not hopeless. What we need is time and luck. Ramirez gave a tight nod. She had a blanket, he said. Pink, cartoons on it. I picked it up at the scene. It's already in the room with her, the doctor replied. We thought she might recognize something if she wakes up. That was a long shot. Ramirez knew that. But it was all they had. As the doctor left, Ramirez stayed behind. The silence returned heavier now. Titan shifted beside him but didn't lay down. He was still waiting for something, for her to wake up, for Ramirez to understand what the dog already knew. They moved to the observation window a few minutes later. From behind the glass, Ramirez could see her, small on the hospital bed, an IV line in her arm, oxygen tubes at her nose, heart monitors tracing weak lines in green, and on the bed, resting near her side, was the blanket. It looked smaller now, lost in the white sheets, but somehow it made the room feel less empty. Ramirez leaned against the glass. Titan sat beside him again. "You dragged me across a street for this," Ramirez murmured. "For her?" Titan didn't blink. "She might not even make it." "You know that?" No response. "But you didn't care about the odds, did you?" Still nothing, just a quiet, living presence. Ramirez shook his head slowly. "You weren't trained for this." And that was the truth that hit the hardest. Because everything Titan did, every move, every step, every refusal to let go, had come from something outside obedience. It wasn't a drill. It wasn't a cue. It was a choice, and that choice had saved 2 lives. Maybe. A nurse walked by behind them, then doubled back. "Detective?" she asked gently. "Officer," Ramirez corrected out of habit. "Sorry, Officer Ramirez. There's something you should see." He followed her to a desk near the nurse's station. She handed him a paper, an intake sheet. "We ran her prints and a partial social lookup," the nurse said. "We got a name." Ramirez read it once and stopped. The name meant nothing to him. No reports, no alerts, no missing persons. Just a first and last, plain as anything, sitting above a date of birth and a line that read, "No known emergency contacts, no family, no partner." No one had come looking, but what hit him harder was the second note, written in pen, not typed. OBGYN flagged risk of premature labor. Baby is in critical watch status, 29 weeks. Ramirez closed his eyes. It wasn't over. Not even close. The next morning came with no clarity, just pale hospital light, bleeding through the lobby windows, and a silence that made everything feel suspended. Ramirez hadn't gone home. He couldn't. He'd stayed in the same waiting room chair for most of the night, with Titan curled quietly under his legs like a statue in uniform. Every hour, a nurse gave him the same update. No change. The baby was still in distress. The mother was still unconscious. And Titan? He waited like the outcome depended on him. Ramirez checked the hospital bracelet they'd given him. Visitor ID, time-stamped, name printed wrong. Officer Ramirez. He didn't bother correcting it. What mattered was what came next. By noon, a nurse approached, same one from the night before, eyes a little softer now. "She's waking up," she said. Ramirez stood instantly. Titan rose too. "They're prepping to move her to maternity observation. The baby's vitals are holding steady now. Not out of the woods, but better than before." Ramirez let out a breath that had been sitting in his chest since the crosswalk. "She asked about the dog," the nurse added, almost like she didn't quite believe the sentence. Ramirez blinked. "What?" "She's been slipping in and out, mumbling. Said the dog more than once. We figured it was yours." It was. They let Titan in first, carefully, slowly, under supervision, but the staff already understood. This dog wasn't there to jump or play. He padded into the dim hospital room like he had been there before, like he belonged. The woman lay propped against white pillows, IV still in place, eyes half-lidded but aware now. Her hand rested on her abdomen, the baby blanket tucked near her hip. Titan walked to her bedside and sat. She looked at him. Not with fear, not even surprise, just recognition, and then her hand moved, reached out. Fingers touched the top of his head. "You," she whispered. "You found me." Ramirez watched from the doorway. It wasn't often that words felt too small, but in that room, nothing needed to be said. A hand on fur, a dog standing guard, a silence that understood more than language ever could. Later, once she had eaten and the doctors gave clearance, Ramirez stepped in with a clipboard. "We still don't have any contacts," he said gently. "No one we can notify?" She shook her head. "No one left," Ramirez nodded. "Didn't push? They said you might deliver early," he added. "You should think about the name soon." She smiled faintly, pale but present. "I already did." She looked down at the blanket in her lap. "He saved me." "Saved us? There's no other name?" She reached for the form the nurse had left and began writing slowly. Ramirez didn't read it until later. In the hallway, under flickering hospital lights, Titan standing beside him like always. The bracelet still sat loose on his wrist. The leash was coiled in his hand. The birth certificate form had a name printed in careful, uneven handwriting. First name, Titan Middle. Name, Elias. Last name, redacted for privacy. Ramirez felt the back of his throat close up, not because it was cute, because it was right. A name earned, not given. A name pulled from pavement and sirens, and a crosswalk light that never turned green. The next time he looked down at Titan, the dog was watching him back, like he already knew. They visited again a week later. The mother was stronger now. The baby had pulled through, fragile, but breathing on his own. In the neonatal unit, Ramirez stood at the window and stared at the tiny form wrapped in warm cloth. The name tag on the plastic bassinet read, Titan E. That was the moment Ramirez knew his partner had done something more than extraordinary. He hadn't just saved a life. He'd shaped it. If this rescue moved you, share it with someone who still believes dogs are more than animals. They're guardians. They're family. And sometimes they're the reason a life even begins. Subscribe for more true stories like Titan's.